The world of ancient Rome was paved in stone and layered in silence. A city of towering columns and gilded statues, of amphorae and olive trees, of roaring crowds and whispered orders. But beneath its marble gleam, behind the laughter at feasts and the triumphal marches, there lived millions whose voices rarely reached the scrolls of history. Their names were forgotten, their stories passed over, but they were the hands that built Rome, the backs that bent to carry its weight. Tonight, we'll follow some of those lives, not the emperors or the generals, not the orators or the poets, but those whose footsteps were soft because they had no right to make noise, slaves in ancient Rome, those born free, then captured, those sold by their families, those condemned for debt or born already tethered by law. Their days were long, their nights brief, their futures uncertain. You won't need to remember names or dates. You don't even need to stay awake. Just imagine yourself in the heart of an old Roman villa. The morning is quiet. The sun hasn't yet touched the white stucco walls, and in the shadows, someone is already moving. The house is still in the moments before dawn, but you are not allowed to be still. If you were a house slave in ancient Rome, the day would begin before light touched the atrium floor. Your first duty might be to tend the household altar, a small, soot-stained niche where the household spirits are honored. Quietly, you would relight yesterday's ashes, whispering a prayer you've memorized but never truly believed in. Silence is expected. The masters and their children are still asleep. The floors must be swept without waking them. Water, drawn the night before from the public fountain, must be poured into ceramic basins. Bread must be warmed. Robes and tunics already laid out must be shaken and folded again just so. And if the master's sandals are not facing the right direction when he rises, there may be consequences. You are not alone. Dozens more like you move through the dim corridors. A boy no older than 10 carries a chamber pot too heavy for his arms. A young woman stirs honey into wine, careful not to spill a drop. An older man checks the oil lamps and counts amphorae in the storeroom, his fingers tracing tally marks that are not his own. Each knows their place, each knows the price of forgetting it. The mistress of the house rises late. She expects perfume on her wrists and pearls at her throat. Her personal slave, often a young girl from the East, must guess her mood before a word is spoken. If the comb snags in her hair, if the tunic fits too tightly, the girl will be slapped. If the girl flinches, she will be slapped again. Slaves are property. There are rules to protect them in theory, but in practice, they are at the mercy of the household. A cup of wine dropped during dinner, a wrong look in the presence of a guest, or even laughter at the wrong time might be punished. Sometimes with a fine, sometimes with labor, sometimes with pain. And always there is no recourse. Meals are elaborate affairs. You are the invisible arms that keep them flowing. Platters must be brought with precision. The peacock must be carved in silence. The master's friends will not thank you. They may not see you, but they will notice the stain on the tablecloth, or the cracked goblet, or the olive that was not pitted, and your master will notice them noticing. You may be assigned to the youngest child in the household, a boy destined for the Senate perhaps. He learns Greek from a hired tutor, but it is you who helps him dress, ties his sandals, whispers reminders before recitations. If he grows fond of you, it means little. When he cries and clutches your arm at night, frightened of thunder, you must soothe him. When he is angry and beats you with a wooden stick because his scroll was misplaced, you must kneel and apologize. Some slaves are educated. Scribes, tutors, even doctors. They speak with elegance and read Latin fluently. And yet, they too are owned. A physician may save his master's life in the morning and be chained for impertinence by nightfall. Intelligence does not free you. Usefulness may delay punishment, but it does not erase it. The house itself is grand. Columns surround the courtyard. A gentle fountain murmurs. But you rarely walk there freely. You are always watching, listening, waiting for the bell, the whistle, the clap of a hand. These are your summons. These are your commands. Some slaves steal moments to breathe. A glance out the window, a bite of fruit taken too quickly in the kitchen, a quiet song hummed behind the laundry wall. But these are dangerous luxuries. If the master believes you are idle, there will be punishment. If another slave is jealous, there may be whispers, and those whispers often cost more than the act itself. At night, the house sleeps again, but you do not. There are embers to bank, floors to sweep again, wounds to tend. Some slaves are allowed to rest in small storage rooms or shared wooden cots. Others sleep beside doors on woven mats, always ready to rise at a sound. You are not paid. You cannot marry without permission. Your children, if you have them, may be sold. Your name may be changed, your history rewritten. And still, you must bow, must smile, must serve. Not all masters are cruel. Some believe themselves kind. They grant small favors, speak gently, avoid beatings. But even kindness is conditional. Even mercy is a gift that can be withdrawn. And so the rhythm of your life continues, the clink of goblets, the rustle of tunics, the hush of your own steps in the morning light. You dream perhaps of freedom. Some slaves are freed through loyalty, old age, or the whim of a will. A freed slave may marry, own land, even rise in society, but the path is narrow, and many never reach it. In this house, you are not truly seen. You are an extension of its wealth, a shadow among marble. You are what makes the grandeur possible, but you may never touch it. And so the day ends much as it began, in silence, in service, in shadows. In the turbulent heart of the Roman Republic, when legions marched across continents and gladiators bled for sport, a single man rose from the chains of slavery to shake the foundations of Rome itself. His name was Spartacus. You've likely heard it before, shouted in films, written in bold letters across history books, but behind the legend is a quieter story. A man born far from the empire's center, swept into its machinery, and ultimately remembered not for victory, but for defiance. Spartacus was not born into slavery. Most historians believe he came from Thrace, a region to the northeast of Greece, where tribal life and Roman border skirmishes intertwined. He may have served as a soldier in a Roman auxiliary unit before deserting, or perhaps he fought against Rome as a free man. In either case, he was captured, and in that moment, his fate shifted from warrior to property. He was sold into slavery and trained as a gladiator in Capua, at a ludus, a gladiator school, run by a man named Lentulus Batiatus. These schools were not glamorous. Think of them less as academies and more as prisons with sand floors and wooden swords. The men who trained there were not only forced to fight, they were shaped, measured, and broken into instruments of spectacle. Spartacus proved capable, strong, intelligent, disciplined. He learned quickly not just how to fight, but how to watch, how to understand the routines of the guards, how the food was delivered, how the others whispered when they thought no one listened. And so, in 73 BCE, he led a breakout. The revolt began with only 70 or so men. They used kitchen knives, training weapons, whatever they could find. They didn't have a plan, only desperation, and that, it seems, was enough. They escaped into the countryside, gathered more weapons, and began to recruit. At first, the Roman authorities underestimated them. A band of escaped slaves, after all, couldn't possibly threaten the Republic. But Spartacus was not just fleeing. He was organizing. Other slaves, shepherds, laborers, gladiators, miners, joined his cause. Some had nothing left to lose. Others saw in him a path to vengeance or a sliver of hope. Before long, he had thousands. He kept his forces mobile, trained them with discipline, and avoided unnecessary battles. His goal, it seems, was to lead them out of Italy, across the Alps, and back to lands where Roman chains could not reach. and perhaps, if the fates had been kinder, they might have made it. But choices became tangled, victories fed confidence, supplies were seized, towns sacked. Rome sent legions, first small, then more. Spartacus defeated several. His ranks swelled. For nearly 2 years he kept the Republic at bay, moving across the Italian peninsula like a shadow they could not trap. He was not a bloodthirsty man, according to some ancient writers. He rejected luxury. He punished cruelty within his own ranks. He even gave Roman prisoners a chance to join or leave unharmed. But his army, numbering perhaps 70,000 at its height, was not easy to control. Some factions wanted to loot, others wanted revenge. Unity frayed. Eventually Rome sent Crassus, a wealthy, ambitious general, to end the rebellion. Crassus was not lenient. He reintroduced harsh discipline to his own men and pursued Spartacus relentlessly. The rebels tried to flee south, perhaps to Sicily, but were blocked. Their ships failed to arrive, and so they turned once more to battle. The final stand came in 71 BCE, somewhere near the river Silurus. We don't know exactly what happened. Ancient sources disagree. Some say Spartacus tried to reach Crassus directly, slicing through lines with only a few followers. Others say he fell defending a desperate perimeter. His body was never found. In defeat, Rome made a brutal example. Over 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, the main road into Rome. A silent line of agony, mile after mile, a warning carved in wood and flesh. And yet, Spartacus became more than a warning. His name endured, not as a traitor or a criminal, but as a symbol of resistance, of dignity in defiance, of the idea that even those born in chains could shape the course of history, even for a moment. He left no writings, no speeches, no surviving image, but the very fact that he troubled the Republic, that senators whispered his name in fear, that generals sweated at the thought of a man who was once only a slave, is testament to the quiet power of those who choose not to bow. And so we return to the stillness of the present, where his footsteps have long since faded and only the dust remains. But the dust remembers, and in that dust, Spartacus is still walking. The town of Herculaneum slept beneath the shadow of a mountain that no one feared. Nestled on the Bay of Naples, it was smaller than nearby Pompeii, quieter, wealthier, more refined. Its streets were paved in black basalt, its houses decorated with frescoes of gods and gardens, its people lulled by the rhythms of the sea and commerce. But beneath its beauty, behind the painted walls and mosaic floors, were other voices, fainter ones, scratched into stone, carved behind staircases, left in places few were meant to see. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it sealed Herculaneum in ash and heat. It buried the city in a single terrible afternoon, preserving not just the villas and shops, but something far more delicate, its voices. And among these, in corners of kitchens and servants' quarters, archaeologists found something unexpected: graffiti, not from nobles or merchants, but from the enslaved. Simple, rough lines, a name, a joke, a memory. They are not grand inscriptions, they do not boast of victories or deeds, but they speak. One fragment reads, "I worked and he ate." Etched into the plaster of a back hallway, it's a quiet complaint. No anger, no rebellion, just the dry resignation of someone whose labor passed unnoticed. Elsewhere, a small hand has carved the image of a dog, tail raised, next to the word faithful. Perhaps it was a pet, or perhaps the word was meant for the dog, or for the one who carved it. Faithfulness was expected of slaves, but it was rarely returned. Another wall bears the phrase "Venustus amat puerum," or "Venustus loves the boy," a declaration of affection, perhaps, or longing. We do not know if Venustus was a fellow slave, a freedwoman, or a name taken in secret. But there it is, scratched into stone, preserved for centuries, a trace of emotion where none was meant to remain. Some inscriptions are names alone: Felix, Rufus, Chione. Often repeated, sometimes with small symbols next to them. A fish, a circle, a bird. These may have been personal marks, or perhaps a game, or prayers we cannot ask them. Graffiti in Herculaneum was often hidden, behind doors, on the backs of cisterns, in stairwells leading nowhere. The kind of places a free citizen would never think to look, which makes their survival all the more remarkable. In the silence of disaster, even whispers were frozen. We imagine the Roman world through its sculptures and temples, but it is in these margins, these carved initials and passing remarks, that something more human survives. The daily pulse of people who were told they didn't matter, leaving behind messages not for posterity, but for themselves. A moment of assertion, a breath, proof that they existed. One particularly haunting find comes from a servant's room, a cramped, windowless space beside the kitchen. On the underside of a wooden beam, someone had scratched a crude tally, each line marked beside another, grouped in fives. 30, 60 more, perhaps days, or tasks, or lashes. The beam is charred but legible. It was not meant to survive, but it did. Other inscriptions are jokes, low, coarse, and full of innuendo. Crude images, insults about masters, names given to vermin. These were not expressions of revolt. They were moments of release, of identity. One reads, "Callistus was here. He still is." Nothing more. But the grammar is playful, the joke obvious, a touch of humor pressed into plaster from someone who knew that history would not ask his name. In the aftermath of the eruption, when excavations began in the 18th century, these inscriptions were often ignored. Some were covered up again, others destroyed, mistaken for vandalism. Only in more recent decades have scholars begun to trace them with care, to lift their words from the dust and examine them not as curiosities, but as evidence. Not all the graffiti belonged to slaves, but many did. And even when they didn't, they speak of them, through taunts, threats, crude praise, and nicknames. A master might boast of how many heads he owned, and that too would be etched into the wall. A reminder that even ownership was a point of pride. Yet amid these echoes of control, we find flickers of individuality. A woman's name repeated beside a heart, a Latin phrase bent into verse, a child's handprint in drying clay. These are not symbols of rebellion, but they are expressions of existence. The eruption of Vesuvius froze a world in mid-step. It gave us amphorae still full of oil, loaves of bread still in ovens, and shadows of human lives caught in flight. But it also gave us something more fragile, unguarded words, small truths. In modern museums, these graffiti are sometimes replicated in quiet corners. A replica beam here, a wall fragment there. Visitors walk past them quickly. They are not dramatic. But if you stop and read, if you let the words speak, you may feel it. The presence of a person who once had nothing but a moment and took it. And in that moment, across 2,000 years of silence, they speak. The senatorial villa rises like a private world, just beyond the clamor of Rome. Set apart by walls and courtyards, it is a place of order and indulgence, a carefully measured rhythm of power and leisure. Inside, every surface gleams. Marble floors swept smooth by quiet feet, bronze lamps polished to a mirrored shine, murals depicting gods who never labor. The master of the house is a senator. He sits not only in the curule chair of office, but at the center of an invisible web. Clients, slaves, landholdings, favors owed and favors dispensed. His name commands attention. His gestures shape futures. But his days begin, like all men's days, with waking. And it is a slave who draws back the curtain to let in the sun. He does not dress himself. A slave selects the tunic, ties the cincture, arranges the folds. another brings warm water, another adds a drop of imported perfume. Their movements are practiced, rehearsed through years of quiet repetition. Their eyes rarely rise above the waist. In the atrium, the morning salutatio begins. Clients, men of lower status hoping for patronage, arrive in togas, waiting their turn to bow, flatter and ask. The senator nods, listens, dismisses. He may offer a coin, a letter of introduction, a vague promise. Nearby, a slave records the names and requests. Another watches for signs of disrespect. The villa is not simply a home. It is a machine. In the kitchen, dozens of staff prepare for the evening's cena. Not just food, presentation. The peacock must arrive with tail intact, the dormice dusted with poppy seeds. The sauces, some warm, some cold, must be timed to perfection. A single cracked plate might draw scorn. A spoiled flavor, humiliation. Beyond the kitchen lies the peristylium, the garden courtyard, filled with boxwood hedges and small fountains. Slaves prune the topiary, sweep away fallen petals, chase away birds that dare to nest near the statues. Here the senator walks with visiting dignitaries, speaking of treaties or grain prices or distant wars. Their voices are calm. Their hands gesture with control, but all around them, unseen, others labor to maintain the illusion of ease. His wife hosts gatherings of her own. Literary salons, readings of Virgil or Catullus, debates on style and virtue. Her hair is sculpted into architectural forms by a hairdresser who begins before dawn. Her robes arranged with care, jewelry chosen to flatter but not outshine. Her personal attendants stand always just beyond her shadow, ready with a fan, a needle, a whispered correction. The senator's children are raised by slaves. The nursemaid who rocks the infant in the night, the pedagogus who walks beside the boy to school, correcting his Latin, the Greek tutor who recites Homer with the eldest daughter. These bonds are deep but conditional. A child may love the one who raised them, and yet one day sell them with a signature and a seal. The villa's walls are layered with quiet politics. A freedman now manages the accounts, once a slave, now entrusted with keys and ledgers. A steward oversees the estate, issuing orders to field workers who rarely see the master's face. In the baths, gossip flows more freely than water. The body slave hears secrets whispered in steam. The cupbearer notices whose goblet is refilled first. The doorkeeper watches who is admitted and who is turned away. Sometimes foreign guests arrive. Ambassadors, merchants, philosophers. They marvel at the wealth, the order, the symmetry. They comment on the beauty of the mosaic floors, the taste of the garum sauce, the cleverness of the host's wit. They do not ask who trims the cypress trees, who scrubs the stone, who coughs silently behind the curtain, holding a tray too long. The senator may visit his rural estates twice a year. There, hundreds labor in vineyards and olive groves, producing the goods that fuel the household. They are managed remotely, a system of letters, overseers, and expectations. Punishments are delegated. Praise, when it comes, is brief. Most of these workers are slaves. A few may be tenants, barely distinguishable by law or fortune. Religion weaves through the household too. Household gods in their lararium are offered wine and incense. Rituals are performed with precision, but not necessarily belief. A slave oversees the daily rites. Another maintains the record of omens. Even the sacred here is administered. And yet, for all its control, the villa is never truly still. Behind every door is a life not quite seen. A young boy, enslaved since birth, dreams of distant lands. An older woman, once free, wonders if her name still exists anywhere outside her own mind. A cook hides a letter beneath the hearthstone. A laundress whispers a lullaby her mother once sang, a language no one else here remembers. The senator's name may be recorded in laws or letters, his face sculpted in stone, but his world was built on unseen hands, on obedience, fear, and practiced silence. Even the grandeur of Rome at its highest relied on the invisibility of those who held it up. And when evening falls, and the guests depart, and the laughter fades, the villa seems at peace. But the lamps still burn, the floors are still swept, and someone, quietly, prepares for tomorrow. And so we return, not to the grandeur of the villa or the echoes of a lost rebellion, but to the stillness from which we began. A city of stone and empire, of orators and senators, fades quietly into the background. And in its place, the softer sounds of labor and footsteps take center stage once more. Slavery in ancient Rome was not a footnote. It was the framework, not hidden in shadow, but built into the daylight, into the rhythm of every market, every villa, every law. Yet despite the enormity of their presence, the enslaved left behind only fragments. No statues carved in their image, no temples raised to their memory, just scratchings on walls. A line in a ledger, a child's name called in sleep. And yet, there is something enduring in those traces, something human. They remind us that history is not only shaped by the victorious or the loudest, but also by those who endured without notice, whose days passed in quiet repetition, who labored not for legacy, but for survival. We do not know most of their names. We cannot say for certain what they believed or what they whispered to each other in the privacy of kitchens and corridors. But we know that they felt the cold of marble on bare feet, that they longed, feared, hoped, just as anyone would. That they were not merely tools in Rome's machinery, but people shaped by circumstance and capable of wonder. And as you lie here now, listening, breathing slowly, the world of ancient Rome grows distant. The streets fade, the voices dim, the flicker of oil lamps gives way to darkness. But perhaps, somewhere in that quiet, you carry a little of them with you. Not their chains, but their humanity, their endurance, their brief, carved words that survived centuries. Rest now. Let the past drift gently away. The marble is cold no longer. The floors are swept. The morning will not come too soon. Sleep well.